Imagine you're flying an experimental jet fighter at 25,000 feet. You're flying at 400 miles per hour and your fuel tank is almost empty. Now imagine you look down and realize your aircraft has no landing gear, no wheels, no skids, nothing. Your only way to survive is to fly your jet precisely into a swinging metal trapeze hanging from the belly of a massive bomber. If you miss, you crash. If you hit it too hard, the metal hook will smash through your cockpit canopy. This was not a theoretical concept. In the late 1940s, the United States military built exactly this machine. It was called the McDonnell XF-85 Goblin. It was the strangest jet fighter ever constructed, and it failed almost instantly. To understand why the brightest engineers in America built a fighter jet with no wheels, you have to understand the terrifying reality of the early Cold War. In the years following World War II, the newly formed Strategic Air Command had one primary mission: to be ready to drop atomic weapons anywhere on Earth, specifically deep inside the Soviet Union. To do this, they built a monster: the Convair B-36 Peacemaker. The Peacemaker was the largest mass-produced piston-engine aircraft ever built. Its wingspan was over 230 feet, longer than the entire distance of the Wright brothers' first flight. It had 6 massive propeller engines, and later they added 4 jet engines just for takeoff and emergency speed. The B-36 could fly intercontinental distances without refueling, but there was a fatal flaw in the strategy. The B-36 was massive and it was slow. It needed fighter escorts to protect it from enemy interceptors. However, in 1946, jet technology was still in its infancy. Early jet engines burned fuel at an astonishing rate. No fighter jet in existence had the fuel capacity to escort a bomber all the way from the United States to Moscow and back. If the bombers went in, they would go in alone, and the military knew they would be slaughtered by Soviet MiGs. The military solution was to turn the B-36 into a flying aircraft carrier. Instead of building a fighter that could fly 5,000 miles, they decided to carry the fighter inside the bomb bay of the B-36 itself. In 1945, the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation was awarded the contract to build this parasite fighter. The engineering constraints placed on the team were completely absurd. The entire aircraft had to fit inside a single bomb bay cylinder that was just 16 feet long. Every design decision in the XF-85 was dictated by that tight space. To save room, the engineers eliminated the landing gear completely. They designed a set of wings that could fold backward along the fuselage, much like a carrier-based Navy fighter. And to make the fuselage as short as possible, they gave it an unmistakable, stubby, egg-like shape. It looked like a toy, but it was not a toy. It was powered by a Westinghouse turbojet engine, armed with 4 50 caliber machine guns, and designed to fight the best interceptors in the sky. The pilot would drop out of the bomber, unfold the wings, fight off the enemy, and then return to the bomber, hooking back onto a complex retractable metal trapeze mechanism. By the way, if you are into stories like this, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and there is a lot more coming. On paper and in the wind tunnels, it was a brilliant strategic solution, but in the open air, it was an aerodynamic nightmare. In August 1948, the military began flight testing the XF-85 over the dry lakes of California. Because the B-36 wasn't fully ready for the drops, they used a modified B-29 Superfortress as the mothership. The test pilot chosen for this incredibly dangerous task was a World War II veteran named Ed Schoch. The initial drop went perfectly. Schoch detached from the trapeze, fell into the sky, and fired up his jet engine. Unencumbered by heavy landing gear, the Goblin actually flew quite well. It was nimble and responsive, but the true test was returning to the mothership. To hook back onto the trapeze, Schoch had to fly directly underneath the massive bomber and carefully match its speed. What the engineers had failed to fully appreciate was the violent aerodynamic turbulence created by a giant multi-engine bomber flying at high speed. A bomber pushes a massive bow wave of air ahead of it and leaves a chaotic wake behind it. As Schoch approached the trapeze, that turbulent air caught his tiny, egg-shaped fighter and tossed it around violently. The Goblin simply did not have the mass or the aerodynamic stability to cut through the turbulence. He made several tense attempts to hook on, fighting the flight controls the entire time. On his final attempt, the turbulence caught the Goblin and slammed it violently upward. The heavy metal trapeze missed the hooking mechanism entirely. Instead, it crashed directly into the cockpit canopy. The impact shattered the glass, tore off Schoch's flight helmet, and knocked his oxygen mask loose. Traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, completely exposed to the freezing slipstream at high altitude, Schoch was suddenly flying a crippled jet with no landing gear. In a display of incredible flying skill, Schoch managed to stabilize the tumbling aircraft. He dove toward the desert floor and performed a high-speed belly landing on a dry lake bed. The reinforced bottom of the Goblin held together. Schoch survived, but the military's confidence in the parasite fighter was permanently damaged. Schoch would bravely make several more test flights, but the results were always the same. The aerodynamic forces beneath the mothership were simply too violent. Hooking the trapeze required a level of superhuman precision that ordinary military pilots could not be expected to perform, especially not under the immense stress of actual combat. In late 1949, the United States Air Force officially canceled the XF-85 program, but the problem of escorting bombers had not disappeared. What ultimately killed the Goblin was not just its own dangerous design, but the arrival of a much simpler, safer idea: aerial refueling. Boeing introduced the flying boom refueling system, allowing standard, fully equipped fighter jets to top up their tanks in midair. Instead of trying to stuff a tiny, compromised fighter inside a bomb bay, the military realized they could simply bring the fuel to the fighters. The McDonnell XF-85 Goblin was an evolutionary dead end. It was built to solve an impossible problem using the technology of its time. Today, the two surviving airframes sit in museums, a strange reminder of the time America tried to build a fighter jet without wheels. If this story was worth your time, hit like and subscribe, and drop what you think in the comments.